No, I don't mean if Zelda the character died. I mean Zelda the franchise. Let me get into it. If you grew up playing Zelda, you probably knew what to expect when a new game came out. You knew you were going to explore a new version of Hyrule, you knew you'd be collecting items that gave you access to new places, you knew you'd have new dungeons to solve, you knew they'd mention the Triforce, you knew you'd eventually see some form of Ganon, you knew you'd get the Master Sword, you knew you'd be collecting empty bottles, you knew you were going to see the Gorons, the Zoras, the Gerudos, you knew you'd be going all around helping people to get heart pieces. Those things were constant in Zelda games, so it was normal to expect them. And even though some games didn't cover the whole checklist, they always had most of those things, because it's precisely the combination of all that what makes a Zelda a Zelda. When the second game came out, they tried something new, and to this day it's still considered the black sheep. So for the third one they came back to the first one's formula, and they kept it that way. They were always innovating and including new things, but following the established formula, until Breath of the Wild. Breath of the Wild completely changed the formula. Now the game was open world, now there were abilities and you had them from the start. Now there were no longer temples where you had to get keys and solve puzzles that would give you new items. Now your weapons could break. Now you no longer got heart pieces by helping people, but by completing shrines. Now you had a bottomless inventory where you could fit any number of animals, stones, monster parts, meals, everything without the need of an empty bottle. There were still Zelda, Ganon, the races, but mechanically speaking, everything had changed. The only time they had changed the formula so drastically, it didn't go well. But now it did, and Breath of the Wild was a success, critically and commercially. I probably spent 150 hours with the game. I did all the shrines, all the quests. The only thing I didn't complete were the Koroks, so I played it a lot and evidently I liked it. But even though I liked the game a lot, I noticed it didn't scratch that itch like every other Zelda always did. The game offered a very different experience. Now you had a huge world to explore, and that's something I love. I was going around with an objective in mind, but I got distracted because I saw something that caught my eye, and I almost always ended up discovering something new, which was pretty satisfying. I know a lot of people think the map was very empty. I can't really make a fair comparison because I haven't played many open world games, but I personally liked it and enjoyed exploring it. But as I said, the experience it offers is very different, and even though I did enjoy it a lot, it's different from what I was expecting. Which doesn't mean it's bad, just different. Upon finishing the game, my opinion of Breath of the Wild was that it was a good game, but a bad Zelda. Why? Well, because it has practically nothing of what makes a Zelda, Zelda. And even what it does have from Zelda, it feels kind of tacked on, mainly the story, which was barely there. It's a similar case to Resident Evil 7, which I also liked and thought it was a good game, but a bad Resident. It has nothing from Resident other than the name. Still, my opinion of Breath of the Wild wasn't negative at all. On the contrary, they experimented with something new and the result was something very fun. So it seemed to me that since it was the first attempt at an open world, it had a lot of future potential, so that the next game could be not only a great game, but a great Zelda. 6 years later, we get Tears of the Kingdom. This time it took me almost 200 hours. Once again, I completed all the shrines, almost all side quests, I completely lit the depths, I got all maps, I upgraded all sages, I got every bubble gem. So yeah, I played it a lot and I had a lot of fun. But unlike last time, now the game left me with a very different feeling. The game started off strong because the story was much better than Breath's from the beginning, and it seemed there was going to be much more to explore and to do. I didn't know there was going to be an underground map. When I discovered it, it seemed very promising. Also, the first time I found a bubble frog in a cave, it immediately reminded me of the Skulltulas. And when I saw that some caves had armor too, that was all the more reason to explore them. I knew that all of those things were going to add to the experience of discovery I had liked in Breath of the Wild. Also, one of the very first shrines I did had a chest with a key in it. I like that because it seemed that now the shrines were going to be more complicated and not just simple easy puzzles like before, and that also increased my expectations for the temples. I left the temples for last. First I wanted to get all the memories, I was liking the story and I wanted to uncover the map. I also started lighting the depths. The first place where I decided to start exploring down there had a coliseum nearby. I had to fight enemies with gloom in the dark, and I got Midna's helmet. It was an excellent way of discovering the depths, and it left me wanting more. As the game progressed, I realized that shrines were still very simple. I rarely found any other key, and even when I did, they were still easy. And the depths, which I had no idea how big were going to be, turned out to be a whole full map, same size as the surface. But contrary to what I thought about it containing interesting stuff, that was not the case. Other than the temple I ran into and some gigas spread here and there, it was basically empty. When I finally went for the temples, I was very disappointed. They were very straightforward and the bosses were super easy. Worst of all, because of the order I chose, there were less objectives in each subsequent temple, so they felt easier and easier each time. The Lightning Temple was the one I liked the most. It felt more like a traditional Zelda temple, and unfortunately it was the one with the least objectives. There are supposed to be 4, but there's a free one right where you start, so there are really only 3. But at least I think that boss was actually a bit better. Still easy though. In the last part there was no temple either, of course, just a bunch of enemies I completely ignored, and the final boss was also easy. By the end of the game I have had fun exploring and doing quests, just like in Breath, but this time I wasn't expecting just a better game, but a better Zelda. And not only was it not a better Zelda, but it wasn't really a better game either. I'd rather say it's more game, but more is not always better. And it's not that I'm saying that the game's bad, I wouldn't have played it so much otherwise. But I really feel that there was no significant improvement over the previous game, either in terms of game or in terms of Zelda. Yes, they included 2 more maps, a big one below and a much smaller one above. But the big one ended up being very disappointing because of the potential it had and how empty it really is. And the small one, which curiously I thought I wouldn't like exploring, was the one I liked the most because there were new, different things on those islands, and just getting to some of them was a challenge in and on itself. So those few tiny islands end up offering much more than all the depths. Other than that, the game is basically the same as Breath. Abilities right from the start, lots of quests, lots of shrines, few temples. They just added more stuff, more maps, more characters, more things to collect, more ways to find Koroks. But as I said, more does not necessarily mean better. And that's only if we talk in terms of game. If we talk in terms of Zelda, all of the elements that were missing in Breath are still missing in Tears, so there it's neither more nor better. And that, I think, is the game's biggest offense, that with all the potential it had, that even though Nintendo knew what were the weak points of the last one, they did nothing about it. Why not make actually challenging dungeons that really put the player to the test? They don't even have to be a lot. Majora's Mask only has 4, and it's almost always among everyone's favorite, me included, and that game was made in only 1 year. Why make even more shrines when they could do less, more challenging ones? Not to mention that many shrines have no puzzles at all. Why not gradually give abilities and items that let you reach other zones, like in the classic Zeldas? They supposedly wanna give freedom to the player from the start, but the game actually does limit you. Since I left all the temples for last, the dialogues with characters that obviously had to change because I had already explored basically everything and I had seen all the memories, didn't change because there are certain things that are not triggered until you complete the temples, and it's not until then that new dialogues and quests are enabled, so the game actually limits you. And being limited, it's not something bad, but in this case it happens in a way that the game seems to be contradicting itself.
I have crucial information about that dragon. But I won't tell anyone LOL.
The trend, it seems, is for Zelda to be an experience of hundreds of hours, with a truckload of things to do, a ton of microsatisfactions every time you find something, and an astronomical amount of thingamajigs to find and collect. And it seems that all of the classic Zelda elements will be forgotten. I particularly would prefer to see a game with the classic formula, that even though it will last much less than Breath or Tears, I will end up enjoying it more, and I'll probably play it more times. But the point here is that it doesn't have to be one or the other. Ideally, they should combine the best of both worlds. Take all those elements that made the franchise what it is today and mix them with the new ones. The potential for a great game that is also a great Zelda is still there. They just have to up and do it. What do you think? Do you prefer the next Zelda to be like the new ones? Do you prefer a classic approach? Or like me, would you prefer to see a mix with the best of both to be able to play something above and beyond everything we have played up until today? Leave a comment with your 2 cents. Thanks for watching and have an amazing day.